when I was born. At 3 days old, I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. So I was given a life expectancy of 18 years old. And so, that's an interesting way to grow up.
Welcome, everyone, to another wonderful podcast and a wonderful day with a very beautiful lady with lovely golden locks of hair. You should see this beautiful long hair. Now, I wish I had that hair. I mean, if you can see me now, some of you can see and others can't. It depends if you're listening or you're watching. I'm bald as a coot and I could do with some hair right now. So anyway, enough of my talking. Again, as always, I do not have a clue what this lady does or her story, and we're just going to go with the flow live as it is and just have another beautiful conversation. And the lady we have with us today is Sorcha Sylvester-Martin. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, and at least I pronounced your name correctly. So
got it.
Perfect. So as we always start off, if you just share how you help people with your successful business, and then we'll go with the flow from there.
Yeah, of course. So I am a person with addiction coach as well as a loved one coach. And what our company does, Face It Together, is we do, I like to call it life coaching with a specialty in addiction. So we help individuals who struggle with addiction as well as their loved ones. And we have a very holistic, wellness-based mindset just to kind of like improve quality of life and get to that stage of recovery, whatever that looks like to you. It's different for everybody. It's very subjective. So specifically, I'm kind of biased to what we do as opposed to, some other recovery support, because it is just whatever recovery looks like to you, whatever you want your wellness to look like, and whatever aspects of life you're feeling like need improvement, that's what we work on. There's no 12-step program. There's no specific requirements. Sobriety is not a requirement for this program. So we really meet people where they're at and help them get to where they want to be, because that looks different for everybody.
Oh, okay. So you do a bespoke really program. So there's no blueprint, there's no specific steps. You actually just engage with the person, find out what their story is, where they're at the time, and then you just find out what works for them in a particular way. Is that correct?
Exactly. We're just trying to be that support to go through that trial and error process with them and try to be a resource. But we also see that individual as a resource, let's look into how you feel about this, what you've tried that has or hasn't worked. And then we get to also bring that collective wisdom from all of our members that we get to talk to into those sessions. So we get to hear a lot of similar stories, a lot of similar patterns. We just get to kind of be that conduit for all of that wisdom and information, and getting to figure that out with the individual and kind of repeating it back to them. Because, especially for us neurodivergents, we can be really good at analyzing or intellectualizing ourselves and having that self-awareness, but sometimes it's hard to kind of pick those pieces out and connect the dots and everything ourselves. So we just try to be whatever type of support that individual needs and be a resource, and also let them know that they're a resource to themselves as well and to others.
Okay, so I take it with your colleagues and yourself, you have a bit of a background to know how to engage and how to read them correctly, because if it's a situation where you are not using, well, I'm sure you are using a loose framework because you have rules and regulations. So you're using some kind of framework, but it's not rigid. And if you're not doing that, then that must come from some extensive experience from you all individually. Maybe some of you had addiction problems in the past, so you see the signs. Is that the case, or am I looking in the wrong direction?
Nope, you are in the right direction. So all of our peer coaches have that lived experience. That is kind of the one requirement for us to even, be offered this type of position. And myself being both a peer recovery coach as well as a loved one coach, I have the experience on both sides. So I myself struggled with addiction. And then I also dated somebody who struggled with addiction to heroin. And so that's where that kind of experience came from. And then we also get nationally certified through the NADAC Association.
Okay.
So we get a lot of good online training. We get some insights on coaching, substance specific information. So we get to learn not only all the science and the database things, but also we learn so much about wellness and again, just the experience that we get from coaching other members, we learn so much there as well. So we kind of attack it from all angles.
Yeah.
And then, I think empathy and the ability to really resonate with people is also a huge factor and a huge trait that all of our coaches have, is just really understanding where people are coming from and letting them speak their piece and figure out what we need to do to get them to move forward.
Yeah, and I suppose the reason why you can attack it from all angles is because you work as a team and you all have a specific skill. As much as, yes, you've all lived through some sort of addiction, but you all have something specifically that you're skilled at better than others. So I suppose as a team, you come together, fill in the dots, fill in the spaces, and that's how you're able to work from different angles, like a 360 degrees. It doesn't matter where or how a person has their issues and their problems from, but by collectively working together, I suppose this is where you're able to work together to cover all bases.
Yeah, definitely. Like, we have such a terrific team. We all have amazing communication. We're always just, member oriented. So if we per se, like, we all have our specific passions and interests and niches, I guess you could say. Like, for instance, mine would be chronic and mental illness and neurodivergence as well as included in that. Not that I think it's an illness by any means, but, just it's a specific way of thinking, I think. And, so maybe if I don't have the expertise that my member's needing, then I can easily reach out to one of the other coaches and say, hey, I know that you are really great at this. You're really passionate about it. You have lots of good information. Can we sit down and have a talk, because my member is really struggling with this and I would like to give them, another perspective. So we have just a very good, open line of communication between everybody, while keeping the members' confidentiality, so I think just teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah, no, I hear that. It's the same old age saying, and it does ring true for sure. Okay, so let's deal with your specific story. You obviously got into this because you've actually lived on the other side and you've come out of the other side too. And you've obviously decided to help others try to shorten the curve that you had to live through. But let's go way back. I mean, what's your story when it comes to the addiction side, and how did you deal with that? Let's start from as way back as you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really starts when I was born. At 3 days old, I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, which is a very serious physical, genetic medical condition that is typically terminal. So I was given a life expectancy of 18 years old. And so, that's an interesting way to grow up, to just kind of expect that. I was constantly sick. I was in and out of the hospital for weeks at a time, multiple times a year, always having to be health conscious, taking all these medications. I had a port at one time. I had a feeding tube at one time. Just kind of dealing with all these different things. And so that honestly gave me, trigger warning, just to throw that out there. But it did give me a lot of suicidal thoughts and pretty dark mindsets from a young age, where I just didn't really feel like life was really worth living, because I would do certain things, get certain passions and hobbies, and get to a certain point, and then at some point it would always just kind of be torn down in one way or another by my medical condition. And I did have a rock. That was my grandmother, who actually ended up raising me. And she tried really hard to, give me a good mindset and put me in all these hobbies and try to find something that I really wanted to move forward with and live for. But when she passed away when I was 14, I just lost it. I just went to a really, really dark place. I started taking her pain medication that she had left over from cancer treatment.
Okay.
And in my mind at the time, again, not a good place where I was at, it was kind of a way for me to try to slowly pass away myself, because I thought, my family's already expecting this from me. They're expecting me to pass at an early age. It could happen at any moment. I did have multiple near-death experiences because of this illness. So in my head, I thought, what is that? They're already expecting it. Thankfully, that specific thing with the pain pills was pretty short-lived.
Okay.
I ended up on my friend's floor with her hand down my throat because I had almost overdosed, at just 14 years old. And then I decided I wanted to live a little bit more. I didn't want to do something like that, but I was still struggling. I didn't know how to process the death of my grandmother. I didn't know how to deal with all of my other things going on, physical and mental struggles that I've had since I can't even remember, since I can remember, actually. And so I started dabbling in all the other things throughout high school.
Of course.
And finally landed on marijuana. And I think because, it was so accessible to me, because I could justify it so well. Living in Colorado, this is one of the states where it is medically legal here and recreational in some areas as well. And for a long time, it did help with a lot of my symptoms with my physical illness. But I completely surpassed the medicinal uses of it pretty much from the time I started using it. So I was getting those benefits, but also in turn damaging my body as well, and my mind for sure. And I did that all day, every day, all the time for maybe about 7 years, I think. Breaks here and there, like maybe I needed to get a job or I got sick or something like that, but it was very consistent for a very long time. And when I was 19 is when I started dating somebody who was in recovery, and then a couple months after we started dating, he fell back into using, and that entire rest of that relationship was spent trying to get him back into recovery and me trying to support him the best I could. I mean, I would go to meetings with him. We would talk. He was very introspective and very self-aware about everything, but he was just dealing with so much of his own stuff. And I didn't have the tools that I have now, or the education that I have now, or the experience to really be able to help him. And so it just didn't end well. It did get physical a couple times. So I did end up moving on from that relationship. But it was something that I always held in the back of my mind. And I think that experience, plus making it past 18, which I never thought was going to happen, just kind of gave me this sense of, okay, well, I'm still here. I don't want to be miserable. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to have these mindsets and perspectives. I don't want to feel bad physically. What do I need to do? And I kind of started going on this help journey that started.
If I can just stop you there, let's talk about this 18 situation, because you said that it was supposed to be until they weren't going to give you beyond 18. How long ago were you told this situation that you had until you was 18? When was you told? How old was you that you knew of this information?
It was very young.
Approximate.
Yeah, I would say is probably after one of my first near-death experiences. I remember the actual conversation my grandma was having with the doctors when they said that. I would say maybe about 5 or 6.
So you overheard rather than you was told, but you overheard this?
Yes, and that was the case many times.
Okay, so multiple sclerosis. Just first of all, let's talk about that. Now, some people may know and may not know. What did you go through? What is multiple sclerosis all about? How did it affect your body?
So it's actually cystic fibrosis.
Oh, cystic fibrosis. Okay.
Yes. No worries. So basically, the easiest way to explain it is a defect in the CFTR gene and at a cellular level. So in most people, if this gene is functioning correctly, this kind of inhibits salt and water from moving in and out of your cells correctly.
Okay.
So in the CFTR mutation, that gets kind of blocked, and the mucus that lines everyone's bodies that is typically, for protection, to make everything, go smoothly and function correctly. It's about the consistency of, I would honestly say, lube is the easiest way to describe it. It's very thin and slippery. It just helps everything go well. In people with cystic fibrosis, it becomes very thick and sticky because of that dysregulation with the salt movement in and out of cells, and it becomes thick like honey and sticky. And so it slowly starts blocking, mostly damaging the respiratory and digestive systems, but it starts blocking things. It's a breeding ground for bacteria. So you're like constantly getting respiratory infections, so many gut issues. You can't absorb food very well. So one of my near-death experiences was actually from malnutrition. Even though I was eating like a horse, I could never absorb enough nutrients.
Okay.
And my digestive system was so damaged. And that's why they ended up putting the feeding tube in, to just force more nutrients. And so most of those experiences that I had that brought me really close to the end were respiratory infections and due to the malnutrition, and sometimes a combination because I was just so weak. So, and then you got to take into account the mental health aspect of everything. When you are being isolated all the time in the hospital, or isolated for fear of getting sick, or isolated socially. I had a lot of experience with that, of like bullying or people just not wanting to be around me because they saw me as the sick girl, or things like that. I was diagnosed with, PTSD, depression, anxiety, all of these things at a super young age. I was in talk therapy since I was 10 years old, and just more things kind of kept happening on top of everything else.
I really feel you. It's hard enough as an adult going through these individual things, let alone these complex, cumulative. At your age, that's absolutely crazy, just going through so many things at once. And then at the age of approximately 5, you overheard that you had only so long to live. I can't imagine how to process such a situation, because it's hard enough trying to do the normal daily things as a child, right? It's hard enough going through your stages of, your usual, stubbornness and learning certain procedures and interacting with people, but to actually live day in, day out with one thing to another, you can't eat, you're in pain, and it just goes on. And then when you was 5, you overheard that. What went through your head if you can still remember clearly? How did you feel at the age of 5? And I'm sure it took time for you to process. So how did you feel over a certain amount of time, be it a week or 2 weeks, when you heard about that? How did you actually feel? How did you physically and mentally feel yourself? I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes as a child.
Yeah. To the best of my, recollection, it was just, there was a lot of denial. For sure, because as you said, I'm a child at that point. I don't know how to process that kind of news. So there was just so much denial growing up, because I still did have that, that drive and that curiosity and just that openness that kids have. I wanted to experience life, but it's almost like it kind of built up over the years, because every time, like I said, I would get really passionate about something, I'd have a good friend, I'd get into a good hobby, and it would kind of get stopped. It was kind of that buildup of whenever that happened, I started slowly connecting like, oh, this is like an actual problem, because I would be in denial. I wouldn't do my breathing treatments. I wouldn't take my medications unless I was supervised.
Yeah.
So that made it worse as well. But I think really hearing that, I was just like, no, I'm going to be like any other kid, which in turn just made it worse. And then I've noticed this pattern in myself, and sometimes it still even happens now, not nearly to the level that it did when I was younger, but I would do this thing where I would just be in complete denial about all of it and avoid it as much as possible, unless I was more or less being forced to do it or being supervised while doing it. Until it got to the point where it was a crisis mode situation, and now I'm in survival, fight or flight in the hospital, being pumped full of antibiotics, constantly being checked on, people saying that, oh, you might not make it. And then at that point, something in me would wake up. I assume, that will to live.
Yes.
And like, oh, no, this is real. This is a real thing. You can't ignore this. You can't deny this. If you do, you're going to die. And so it was just such a back and forth thing for so long that I just did not want to accept what was happening to my body, but in turn I ended up damaging it more.
To be honest, if I can stop you there, to be honest, it was totally understandable you was in that mode of thought, because as a child, and especially when you have other children around you living normalish lives, because nobody lives normal lives, it's just how we perceive it from the outside, right? But normalish lives, you want to be normal too, right? And if, as you said, hey, life is great at the moment, I don't need any of this anymore, rightly so, and most people would think that, especially when they're kids, are totally understandable. So especially when you start doing the things that or stop doing the things that you're supposed to do, and then you start going downhill. And I can't imagine as a child processing all of that information while trying to be normal, as well as being bullied and everything else because you're the sick child. You did, to be honest, you did so well to get to this stage, and also at the stage of trying to help people coming out the other side, because your life was forever a battle, constantly, 24/7. There was no let up. And in a way, I suppose it was more of a situation when things were going well for you. It was quite cruel in a way, because things went really well, and then all of a sudden it was taken away from you, and in a big way. So how did you feel about that when you was on this super high, and then you'd get this massive crash at that point? What was going through your head at the time?
I think, because it kind of happens a lot.
Oh, does it?
A lot, and still does for everyone. That's kind of how life is. But I think it just developed this mindset, and I actually heard a wonderful quote about this morning. But I think that pattern really developed this mindset that life was about surviving instead of living. All of my focus at some point, I can't really pin down, a moment in my childhood, but it definitely happened pretty early on, where my life stopped being about connection, and it stopped being about seeking joy and passion and things, and it started being more about just getting through to the next day. And I started focusing on all of the negatives in life a lot. All of my health issues, the mental issues, things in people around me. I started noticing all the negative patterns at a very young age. I started having a lot of anxiety because I was just constantly in fight or flight mode. I was just in survival mode all the time, and I didn't know how to get out of it, because I guess I was afraid if I did that I was going to die. So
that's amazing, to be honest. So you found out that at the age of 5 that you didn't have long to live. You was on a serious roller coaster of a ride. You then, at much later age, obviously, when you're much older, you met your boyfriend, which wasn't good for you because you were busy looking after yourself, but now you have to look after a dependent, like having another child, really, isn't it? effectively. Would that be correct, or is how I explain your relationship with the boyfriend? Is it like looking after another child?
Yeah, I mean, it was because we kind of became codependent, and I really put it on myself that, as a lot of us do in relationships with somebody who's a little more emotionally immature, I guess you could say, and dealing with their own struggles of, I love this person, I care about this person, and I want to support them. So when things don't go well and progress isn't being made, some of that, you kind of take on some of that personally. And that was a big thing that I had, where I didn't really have many boundaries with that kind of idea and that phenomenon of, I had a track record of being in that kind of codependent space where my emotional state and my mental state and even my physical health depended heavily on how this person was doing. So he wasn't doing well, therefore I was not doing well.
I get you.
Know how to have those boundaries. And that's a huge part of what we do as loved one coaches, is how do you support the person that you love who is struggling with this without it consuming you and negatively affecting your own wellness.
So let me just ask something. My spider senses are tingling away. Right. So you had this relationship with the boyfriend, but can I say, was it also a situation, it helped you in another way, even though it was negative, but it helped you in another way alleviate things away from you? Because it was always a situation that you was negative most days, right? So from your point of view at the time, hindsight is completely different, but at the time, did it feel better to be looking after someone else than looking after you?
Oh, 100%. You definitely hit the nail on the head. I mean, I was always really driven to that caregiver dynamic in one way or another. Like, I worked as a caregiver for years in the medical industry. I think even now what I'm doing kind of falls under that category, but being able to support and take care of somebody else made me feel this sense of purpose and worth that I had never felt previously, because I couldn't do it for myself. And I still really struggle with that sometimes. So you really hit the nail on the head. Yeah, I felt maybe if I fix this person, I will have the confidence and the strength and know that I can do it myself, or for myself rather.
Yeah, and to be honest, I get that, because you tried the same old for how many years, right? So now, why not try something different? I suppose you didn't know that at the time, but subconsciously, it was a situation, well, let's try something different. And obviously, your emotions kicked in a certain way and you tried something different, but obviously it wasn't the right thing for you. But just like anything in life, we are supposed to make these mistakes, because by only doing that can we then know what we need to fix, be that in someone else or in ourselves. So I totally get why you did what you did, especially when you had to deal with the life the way you did. So you had the relationship with your boyfriend. Obviously that took its toll. And how long did that carry on for when you obviously had that relationship? How long did it last for? How long did that take to be stagnated and finish?
I think in total, it was almost 2 years.
And quite intense too. And I can feel they're quite intense. So what made you, and I take it was you that stopped the relationship, is that correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So, because there's a lot of people, when they get into a relationship like this, it tends to go in more than 2 years. It can go in for a very long time. So what broke the camel's back with you? Because I'm sure you may have tried to split the relationship more than once, but somehow you found the strength to leave. So what was the process there for you to have the strength? Because now you're in a situation where, okay, he's codependent on you. You want to fix him so you don't have to fix you. And what then changed for you to think, I can't fix you anymore. I need to fix myself and move on?
I think it definitely was a buildup of things, So as I said, I tried to do what I felt was best, go to meetings with him, go to these classes with him, We would talk all the time. He was very introspective and aware, so we did have a lot of conversations about it. But I kind of slowly realized each time, because he would go through this pattern of trying to stop using, and then he would go through the withdrawal process, and that was always the worst time, and that's when things ended up getting physical a few times. And then I would say, I always had told myself, no matter what, if somebody physically harms me, like, I'm out, I need to leave. Yes. And so each time that would happen, I would say, I'm going to leave and pack up all my things and get ready to go. And then, we would have this whole conversation where he would apologize and say, like, it's just the drugs, it's just this. And I believe that. I truly did believe that. And I knew that because when we first met, he was not doing that and he did not act like that. So I knew the reality of that, but I slowly started noticing I kind of exhausted all my efforts. And I noticed that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried to support him, no matter the background work that I did to try to be a better support to him, it wasn't a me thing. I'm not the one that's going to be able to do the work to improve your life. I can be here to support you, but it was just consuming me. And I noticed the pattern that you said, where I was using it as almost a savior complex of, if I can save this person. But I wasn't happy for most of that relationship. I was absolutely miserable. I was in a terrible living situation. All my energy and effort was going into trying to help him when I was barely on my feet myself, and I was just so mentally drained and emotionally drained. And so I slowly started pulling away. I got a better job, which then led me to be able to get my own apartment. And I just slowly started doing these things for myself and getting my self-care back on track. And as I kind of raised myself back up a little bit, my threshold to deal with the bad stuff went down. And when I got my own apartment, something in me just broke, and I realized that I don't have the means to help this person at the point where he's at right now, and I'm not responsible for those emotions and those actions and behaviors and things that he's doing. And staying here is not benefiting either of us, because I started reacting negatively as well and could no longer support him and just was trying to run. And so I figured I need to just cut the tie and leave, because I'm also enabling these behaviors and these actions for him to think they're okay, and for him to potentially do this to a future partner. So by no means was it like, I need to do this because you need to have a consequence, but in a way, that's kind of what I saw when I got out of it, is that, he finally learned that you cannot do this, because he had also had a lot of enabling in his life as well, from what I know about his past. And that's something he even told me after we broke up and he was able to get into recovery, is that me leaving was what broke for him and what inspired him to get recovery, because he realized what he was doing. So
wow, that's do you know what, that's last 2 minutes of you describing what happened is amazing, because number one for me, it's you knew you systematically had to put things in place while you was having a destructive relationship to get a new job, to get a new place, to get this and to get that into place. Now that's quite difficult to do, especially when the person's pulling you back because there's the excuse of the drugs for this and so on and so forth. And for you to have the strength to do that in a relationship is very, very hard. I know people that couldn't do it. They just needed to go to cold turkey and just run for the hills. So where did that logical behavior come from? To me, it was, you made a plan and you thought, this isn't working. I've got to systematically do this, then do that, then do this. Where did that strength of logic come from? And the reason why I ask this, because most people in your position couldn't do that. So I'd like to understand the process of where you get that strength from, or your character from, for you to be able to do that in the midst of danger and of a relationship that's quite abusive?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually have been thinking about this a lot and had a conversation with my friend about this topic where, I don't know if you've heard this quote, I'm definitely going to butcher the exact wording, but where it basically says, for some people, fear and getting into that kind of crisis situation shuts them down. And for me, I feel like, and a lot of honestly neurodivergent people, I've noticed all my friends are the same way. We're just kind of so used to being in some sort of struggle, and especially me with my illnesses. And like I told you earlier about the pattern of I would let something get to a crisis mode before I would take action, but then I would be so motivated, like that will to live would kick in, and I would just be like, X, Y, and Z, I need to do these breathing treatments, medications, right. I need to improve my health. Like I would always get so motivated. And so I think I had a lot to higher of a threshold and a tolerance for the negative things. But once that threshold finally breaks, my brain just goes,
that's
nope,
right.
We need to get into action. And so once all of those little things built up to that break and reaching that threshold, my brain went, nope, we're no longer okay with this. We can no longer be here. We need to get out or we're not going to survive. And so that survival instinct kicked in, and I said, okay, what do I need to get out of this? I need to get out of this living situation because I don't have anywhere else to go. So I need money to do that. So I need a better job to do that. So I need to quit. And this is one of the times I quit smoking as well. So I need to quit smoking because I won't be able to get a good job if I am, if I fail a drug.
Hold on. You quit smoking amongst those other things while being in that destructive relationship.
Yep.
That makes sense, but because we've spoken about your survival skills, and you've gone back to how you were and how you had to, right? Because of your illness and whatever. And this is why I wanted to find out where that came from, because most people can't do that. I mean, so many people I've spoken to when they go through this trauma, but because, and this is what I say to the listeners, things happen in life that necessarily aren't bad. They feel it at the time, but it is a process for us to become stronger and become more resilient. Until you look back with hindsight, can you then say, aha, that's why I have this strength, and that's why I could be in this position, because I was prepped for this stage of my life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm resonating with what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's absolutely, and I'm sorry if this sounds morbid, but it's absolutely, your life is absolutely beautiful from the point of view that to be a great leader, and this is one of the reasons why I started this podcast, because whether you're neurodivergent or you go through great trauma, for you to be a great leader or to have great goals, and that goal can come in any guise, it doesn't go from A to Z overnight. You have to go through a path, you have to go through some pain, and you have to go through sometimes some chaos before you can get to your greatness, whatever that may be. It's different for everybody. So like I said, I don't mean to be morbid, but your life is actually beautiful, because you've inspired me thinking, my God, could I really go through something like that? How did she do that? And then on top of that, you've inspired me again, because you've gone through a very abusive relationship, and you've actually got the strength to be logistic about it, to be logical about the situation, and put a plan together while being in that case, and still jumped out of the hole. And you know how many people you've inspired now that are listening to you that are in abusive relationships, be it addictive or otherwise, because now they're thinking, I can do it too, because actually I've got a similar past like her, or maybe not. She's shown me the blueprint and how to do it, and that just amazes me. All right, I'm talking too much. Let's move on. I'd like to analyze. I like to,
No, I love it.
Yeah, I like to know where people come from. It's really interesting, because that's how I learn to be more empathetic to other people.
Yeah.
All right. So you had that relationship. You've got out of that. Now, you said you've had addictions. what form of addictions have you had? So you obviously smoking is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And what else?
I've had multiple. So the very short-lived one of the pain medication, although I didn't really ever like that, and I never have had a problem with it again. So not sure if that one really counts. The marijuana was for sure a thing. And then actually, even after I really started tapering down that and kind of working through that to get to my recovery process, then I started falling into, and also I think the relationships were a factor, but at one point I felt like I got really addicted to like certain foods. Like I struggled with an eating disorder, and I kind of used that because, you know, it's a trend across the board with everybody I've ever worked with everybody I've ever known, as well as myself, is you're not doing that for any reason other than you're coping with something. You're not processing something, you're running from something, you're trying to make something feel better. And I think that can come in so many forms. I mean, look at nicotine, look at caffeine, look at sugar. The three biggest things that are so widely accepted and even encouraged are all super addictive and super damaging to our body and our brain. And so I fell into multiple things, or even dating, like especially now we've got dating apps, and going on that in between my relationships to try to fill that void with talking to somebody else was a trend in my life for a long time, because I just wanted to feel needed. I wanted to feel desired. And a lot of people do that same trend, and I know it because I've seen it all the time. But we're always trying to find some way to not face those negative feelings and emotions. But what I learned with, you know, my medical condition, and that took me a long time to connect to these other aspects of my life, is denying those emotions, not feeling them, denying your circumstances will never help you. You have to have that radical acceptance of, this is where I'm at now, and not look too far into the past or too far into the future for any reason other than to give you a lesson and a motivation. Because you need to just know where you're at now, where you want to get to, and then start thinking logically of, how do I actually make this happen? And give yourself the time and the patience to be able to grow and get there.
Yeah, so would it be right to say, because your addiction went from one form to another, you wasn't dealing with the source, so hence you were able to stop one thing, but the addiction just carried on. It just took a different source. And so without dealing with the core issue, you can never completely stop an addiction, because it will take the form of a cigarette or alcohol or a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the case may be. But without accepting what is really going on and facing what's really going on, you can never really truly stop the addiction. Would that be correct to say?
I would agree with you. Yeah, you got to get to the source. You got to really dig deep and figure out what's going on. And I think it all really goes back to perspective and mindset. And I feel like you're the same way as I am, but I always like to ask people, like, how do you think that your past has affected you now, or your experiences have affected you now? Because that's going to tell me how you developed, what coping mechanisms you've developed over the years that did work for you at that time. Like, that's where all these things are coming from, is you're just trying to survive. And sometimes we develop these mechanisms of survival that are not benefiting us after we get out of that situation. And I think that addiction in any form is one of the main ways that people do that, is they're adapting and they're not looking at the source or the cause of whatever they're struggling with. So they just throw a Band-Aid on it of some sort.
Okay, so did you find your source of issues at some point?
I think there's a couple, but I do think specifically with, you know, the addiction and kind of that like self-sabotaging behavior almost, there was like a complete lack of self-love and value and worth. Because, you know, growing up with that illness. I didn't think I was going to be around, so I didn't think I was going to be able to contribute much. I didn't think I had much of a purpose. I just felt like a burden on my family for always being sick, for them having to take me to these doctor's appointments, spend all this money on my medical care, spend all this time and energy on me when I didn't think I was even going to exist for much longer.
My God. You had such a melting pot of emotions to have to go through. And as a child, you should never have to deal with feeling guilty because of money, feeling guilty because you're taking someone's time, and you had so much to deal with. So I take it that you had to go through a stage that you had to accept certain things about you or about your life to be able to move on in a positive way. And when that acceptance took place, what things did you have to accept to be able to move on to the next stage of your life, to start to give up your addiction? Because I take it you haven't been addicted for some time, going from one addiction to another. So for that to take effect, you had to have some kind of acceptance. What was that acceptance and when?
I think, to put it in kind of one, the big picture was that I was not the victim, that I do have some sense of control, and that, as I said, these things that I've developed, these traits, these coping mechanisms, these behaviors, these mindsets are not serving me anymore. And I think that's a really hard thing for you, specifically your brain and the way that it works, from what I know about the science behind it, to accept, because it's almost like an ego death, if anybody is familiar with that phrase, of you have to literally let a part of you die in order to become a new person. And that is really hard for people to accept, and it's violently uncomfortable. If you've ever had one of those like big realizations and life-changing, behaviors, and start on that path, it is so uncomfortable. No matter how much you logically know this is going to benefit me, this is the right thing to do, this is how I really feel about this, it's violently uncomfortable for a really long time.
I tell you what, I never thought of it from that point of view. It's true, you're going through a form of death, because you're having to leave your old self behind for you to create a new. So taking that into account, that is really, really difficult for someone to do, to actually go from one state to another. And you've actually put it in a really good perspective. And that is very, very difficult. But you were able to do it. You got, just like most people, they get to a certain stage in their life and they think enough is enough. Then after that, it was a situation, you can control the situation with addiction. Now, I know it's still not easy. I know you still have your ups and down days, but you catch yourself, right? And you put yourself in a better mindset. Is that correct?
Yeah, now that it's, it starts as a super conscious and takes a lot of your energy to really like catch those mindsets and perspectives and behaviors. But once it's a practice, it's a skill that you develop to be like, okay, this is my instinctual reaction. I can connect this reaction back to, this circumstance, this experience, this mindset. And it's always going to be in the back of your head. I don't think anybody I've ever spoken to who has had some trauma and things in their past that they've been dealing with, that never fully goes away, because it is a part of how you developed and becomes kind of a part of your core and where these motivations and things come from. But I think it is a skill to be able to be thinking a certain way or have some sort of reaction, to stop yourself and say, okay, this is not the person I want to be. This is not how I actually think. This is just a reaction that I'm having because of a previous experience in my life. And then that just becomes easier and easier until it happens in a split second. It goes from a whole conversation in your head and just this whole mix of emotions to it happens in a second, where now you're acting and speaking as the person that you are now and want to be in the future.
Okay, so do you think this is a skill that anybody can learn with the right support?
100%.
And obviously, you decided to, before we go there, actually, before I ask that question, let's just trail back just a bit. So you started to go through the stage of accepting. You were out of the relationship with the boyfriend. Time has now gone on. At what stage did you think to yourself, I want to use this newfound skill and I want to help other people? What happened around about that time for you to start thinking like that?
I think after I got out of that relationship, it did, again, I was in a crisis situation that gave me the motivation to kind of take the next milestone. And I started thinking, like, I do have this kind of caregiver complex where I want to help people in some way. But once I was able to separate the responsibility of that I can support somebody and help somebody, but I am not responsible for the outcome. They have to do that. Like, that's their piece of it. I got a health and wellness coach certification, and then it just took off from there because I just wanted to know, honestly, how to help myself is the reason that I started doing that, because I wanted to be able to know the ins and outs physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, how I can kind of get my own wellness back on track. And once I learned that, I realized, oh, this is it. Like, this is my passion. I want to be able to give this information to other people who may not have, the time, the energy, the financial means to really dig into and do the research and get the education piece of it. But I can use my story, my experience, to that wisdom and pass it along to people and hopefully have them resonate with that in a way and be able to explain it in a way that they can understand it and really absorb it and put that into practice.
How wonderful. And when I have a conversation with any entrepreneur, it's the same thing over and over again. It always leads to their experiences of their path in life, and they're using their life experience to help people, which is the most powerful way than having an education. Yes, education is good, but life experience cannot be beaten whatsoever. So straight away you can be what's the word for it? Empathy. I've lost the word.
Empathetic.
There you go. See, I am neurodivergent. I honestly. Yeah, and you can actually see where people are coming from a mile off. So you then know how to prepare to help them take their journey, to help them resolve the issues they have within their life. So you got together with this organization, and you decided to work with this organization with a good team where you work together and you share each other's skills. How long have you been working with this organization to help others?
So I've actually been here for a year this month.
Congratulations. No two ways about it. And how does it make you feel when you help a person get to their goals? Because obviously they're going through their journey. It's not a situation where, okay, they start with you, 2 months later they're off and they're jumping over the hills for joy. It's a journey. So when you actually take them through the journey and they're actually successfully overtaken certain parts of that journey bit by bit, and you see the success, how does that make you feel, considering that I'm sure it takes quite a bit of energy to follow their journey?
Yeah, it does. But there's just nothing like it. There's nothing like the feeling of knowing that you were able to support somebody and play a part in them figuring out their worth and their value and getting to this place where they're excited about life. I have this quote for my own business that's basically going from surviving to thriving. And when I see that, or I get that confirmation via, somebody just telling me like, this is the best decision I've ever made in my life. I've had that a few times just coming to us to do coaching. I happy cry every time. Like, I just
really
overwhelmed that.
Oh, great.
this really worked for this person. And, it's not going to work for everybody, but I think reaching out to get that support, support is so vital for people. And for some people, that's literally all it takes is they're the resource. They have the tools, they have the experience, they have the knowledge, they know themselves best. But just having somebody else tell you those things can be so validating and so essential for people who have never had that kind of support before. And I just get really, really overwhelmed with how fulfilling it is and how just amazing people are and how inspiring people are. I think that inspiration is where that comes from, because like you said earlier, having that general curiosity about things and liking to know the way people think and the way people work.
That's right.
And seeing them come from such a dark place and now changing their life for the better is just, I can't even describe it. I wish there was a word for that specific.
No, I know what you're saying. I know the feeling you're talking about, because I love helping people, and that's what I was put on this earth for. But may I say, I know you said that it's not for everybody, but what I would say is everybody needs support, but not everybody's ready at a particular time to have that support.
Yes.
They've got to be at a particular stage of their journey to be able to take on the support that you're giving, be that you or anybody else. So that's not an underlining negativity on yourself or anybody else. It's just they are not ready. And it's the same thing when you're setting up a business. Some people are just not at the right stage. But they will be at some stage. And it's great that you're in a position that you can give them that support and happy cry at the same time. And you deserve to be in the happy cry situation, because for so long it's been so difficult for you to have a job, to have a way to help people, and to see how it changes their lives in particular. It's not like you're in a restaurant and you give them a beautiful meal, and that's nice, but you're actually changing and ricocheting their lives. Not only are you changing that particular person's life, but the people they touch within their circle's lives. So not only have you changed one life, you've changed two, which then turns into five, and so on and so forth. Because just like when you was in that toxic relationship, I'm sure when you was in that toxic relationship and it was very difficult for you, it was very difficult for the people that were touching your life in particular, and it was difficult for them. Whilst now, you're in a better situation, which means everybody's proud of you and everybody's inspired by you. And it's the same thing. It's actually beautiful to watch. And Sorcha, thank you for being an inspiration for sure. You have a beautiful life journey, which has created a beautiful person in yourself, which then you've touched other beautiful people, because you only attract the kind of people you need to attract to actually go forward in a positive way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And followers and listeners, am I talking too much again? I am, aren't I? Should I just shut up? I better shut up and say nutto. I'm talking too much. So, okay. So tell us more about the business from the point of view. Who do you help? Do you help people from the point of view of just one-to-one? Do you help groups? Do you help corporates? How does this whole structure of the business work?
Yeah, so our coaching is one-on-one. So you get that, that personalized support. We do try to play matchmaker. So we will always ask when somebody's onboarding, we want to know as much of their story as they're comfortable sharing at that moment, in order to try to pair them with somebody that we feel like they will best connect with and resonate with, and maybe somebody whose coaching style and perspective seems the best for them. But that's always adjustable as well. So we always make that disclaimer too. Like, if you feel like you need another perspective, don't ever feel like you're stuck with one coach. All our coaches are amazing in different ways. So whatever you feel like is going to work best for you. We do also do, we have a Fit at Work program that we can set up. So that's basically where we work together with a business specifically, and we get it set up so that all of their employees can utilize our services for free. So that, because like you were talking about with the domino effect, you have an employee who you're focusing on their wellness and showing them that you value and care about them as an individual and what they're, dealing with. That in turn is also going to make your business more successful and the well-being of your business thrive as well. So it is one-on-one. Again, we do person with addiction. So if you yourself are struggling with some sort of addiction to drugs or alcohol, and we also do loved one coaching. So anybody impacted by somebody struggling with addiction, whether it's your spouse, your son, your daughter, your mom, your dad, your sister, your friend, anyone who cares about someone with addiction and wants to know how to support them without it negatively affecting themselves. And the best way to get into contact with us to do that is go to our website, wefaceit.org, and fill out an online inquiry or give us a call. And we will move forward from there and get you the support that you need.
Wow. Well, you heard it here, listeners. You can see with her journey why she's so good at what she does. Well, after all, it would be natural that she would be good at it, because instead of going to uni and taking 3 years, she's had a lifetime of experience, which now leads her to the situation where she can help many of you in more ways than one. Sorcha, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to put a line in the sand. I've tried to be disciplined. I can easily... Do you know what? There's so much I want to ask, to be honest. And I need another hour to ask the things I need to ask. But I did promise myself I will try to slow down a bit and not make it more than an hour. And it's gone over that now. So it is what it is. There's no two ways about it. So how do people get in touch with you and the organization?
Yeah, again, so best way, go to wefaceit.org. You can find our email, our phone number, but the best thing to do to get a super quick response is fill out one of the online inquiry where it says get started, and then somebody will reach out to you within 1 business day.
Wow, that's fast. And as always, I'll put the information down below. And to make life easier for you, to copy and paste or click away, whatever takes your fancy. And as you hear, it's easy enough to get in touch with her and the team. And she's good for you to go to if you have any issues. So with that said, Sorcha, thank you for giving up your precious time and making yourself a bit vulnerable, talking about, there's a lot of things you've spoken to, and it's I know it's a bit sore, and we appreciate that, and thank you, because that's going to inspire a lot of people to go forward within their lives and to reach out to you. So thank you, Sorcha, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. In the meantime, listeners, sayonara.